Well, hello and welcome to episode 89 of Toward a Better Life. This is your host, Kevin Pinnell. This episode is going to feature my interview with Jeff Patterson on the blending of meditation with martial arts and other forms of movement. And along with that, a very special opportunity, I'll be having a guided meditation at the end of the episode. Thanks, by the way, for the fantastic results from the last episode featuring Damh the Bard from DruidCast OBOD, the Order of Bards Ovates and Druids, along with a couple of selections from Dave's latest album, Raise the Flag of Green, available from Pagan Music and Spotify. That was a great turnout, guys. Thanks ever so much for tuning in. I am looking forward to talent, by the way. If you have a story, you're a storyteller, a poet, a musician, and you'd like to share it, send it to me at kevin@towardabetterlife.com. And if you're sending something in a audio file, be sure to make it as an MP3. This show is not just about me and all my guests, who are fantastic. It's also about all of you, like-minded people, with stories, ideas, and activities on what we can do to generate a better life individually and collectively. We'd love to hear stories from the bardic ways, pagan, folk stories, folk medicine, the old folk remedies, whatever works for you. Be sure to send it to me. If you enjoy the episode, or if you've learned something really good today, please consider following the show, subscribing through your favorite podcast platform like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon, to name a few, and please be sure to leave me a review. Please also help to do this because the podcast can reach out to even more people who are interested in moving toward a better life. I want to add something else to you today. Just have a lot of thoughts, and I'll even say a lot of really good energy sent out to Western North Carolina. It's where this podcast originates. As many of you may know, we just went through a tropical storm, Helena. We've had a lot of really tough times for a lot of people, and a lot of people are banding together to make the best of a really difficult time. So just have good thoughts about these people, and you might even think about doing a search for Asheville, and you might find some opportunities to give, to share, and to whatever you can to help out everybody in this part of our country. Now, for this episode, I'm going to be chatting with Jeff Patterson from Portland, Oregon, who has had over 36 years of experience practicing and teaching the meditative and martial arts. Jeff founded Northwest Fighting Arts Portland Tai Chi Academy and the Yielding Warrior, where he emphasizes the transformative power of meditative and martial art practices, particularly the yielding concept. He has published 2 books with hundreds of instructional videos. Jeff has also founded the Yielding Warrior online program and has worked with thousands of students from around the world. Keeping with the meditation theme, I'm going to be leading a short guided meditation right after Jeff's interview to help you along with your meditative journey. But first, here's my talk with Jeff Patterson, Meditation of the Yielding Warrior. Today on Toward a Better Life, we're talking with Jeff Patterson out in the Pacific Northwest. How you doing, Jeff?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Great, thank you so much. One of the things that I noticed when we were going over the material of your background and so forth that attracted me is a couple of key terms that picked up on, like the Yielding Warrior and meditative arts with a healing warrior, and or Yielding Warrior, excuse me. But I think that's a phenomenal look of things. So why don't you give us all a little background of Jeff Patterson? We can go from there.
Sure. So I've been running a martial arts academy here in Portland, Oregon now for about 30 years. I started it up back in 1994, and it's been the majority of my adult life. When I got out of school, I graduated college in 1995, and I just went full bore with running the academy, and been doing it ever since. I've spent the majority of my career traveling around the world, training with teachers, and just improving my skill set to offer a better program here for my students. And while the Martial Arts Academy has been kind of my main driver, one of the things that's always been really passionate with me is the meditative arts.
Hmm.
And, I was turned on to the meditative arts in a bit of a roundabout way, in that when I was 19 years old, I was very much into Western boxing. And
Oh,
I, I used to go to a gym that was just a few blocks down the street here from my academy. And, um, at a boxing gym, I'm not sure, for your listeners that may not know this, the way that they run a gym is a lot different than your traditional kind of fitness style class where you come in and there's one teacher and everybody that's in the gym is working out with that teacher. Well, in a boxing gym, usually there's four or five different coaches, and each one of those coaches might have a handful of fighters that they're working with. Well, at this one particular gym, there was one coach there who had created national and world champion level fighters, and I really wanted to get to spend some time with him. And so I would always show up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there and show him that I was there to work hard, and let him know that I wanted to spend some time with him. And after following him around for 3 or 4 months, he finally started giving me some tips and showing me some stuff. And it was only about maybe 2 or 3 weeks of working with him. And he said something to me that changed my life forever. And that he said, if you really want to be a good boxer, you should start doing meditation and Tai Chi. Now,
hmm.
at the time, I'm this 19-year-old kid. I don't know much of anything, thinking, isn't Tai Chi for like older people in the park? How's that going to help me be a better fighter? And it, uh, it just changed my life in many ways. And through the years, I've had well over 26,000 students come through the academy here in Portland, and I've literally heard hundreds of stories of how the meditative arts has positively influenced people's lives, which has made me so passionate about wanting to get the message out there. And it's why I created my last couple books and created my online program and all that. And so that's kind of where we're at today.
So I just heard you say that last little bit there, online program. So do you do classes online?
Yeah, so at the yieldingwarrior.com, we have a online internal arts program that teaches people about the meditative arts, from sitting meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, Yichuan, and teaches them how to build an evolving life practice around the meditative arts. And
Hmm.
then also for those out there that are maybe running a yoga studio or a martial arts studio or a life coach, and they want to find ways to add another pillar in their business, there's also a teacher training program up there as well.
Cool. You're very well rounded, and I like what I'm hearing. This is pretty cool stuff because I've had a philosophy of my own that for years that when we look at Tai Chi, Qigong, my initial exposure was through karate, Goju-Ryu karate, Okinawan style. And I've always heard, and I've always said as well to students and heard from senseis and sifus that any movement like this, any martial movement, if you really look at it from a standpoint of moving meditation so that you become one with everything around you. And like if I extend my arm out, it's not a separate entity in and of itself. It's an extension of my being. It's an extension of where I start. And from what I'm hearing, that's almost something that you would teach in your school and in your practice.
Yeah, so I think that the cool thing about the meditative arts and integrating them with athletics or the combat arts, whatever it is that you're into, it teaches you how to really expand your awareness and to be more in tune with the body physically, mentally, and emotionally. So everything you do, your timing gets better, your coordination gets better, your power gets better, your focus, your ability to see angles and break things down. I mean, everything seems to just kind of resonate and click better when you're more present in the moment. And that's one of the reasons why, my boxing coach so many years ago was telling me that I needed to do this.
Yeah. What I'm curious, what was your major in college?
I got 2 degrees, and one was in finance and the other one was in management.
Okay. Well, that explains, getting your business going. But I was curious whether or not you had any kind of an engineering background or anything, because we're talking about the angles and so forth. And, you know, even when I'm doing body work with someone as a clinical massage therapist, people will ask me about, well, how often do you practice Tai Chi? And I said, pretty much every day. And they said, well, you're going to wear yourself out. I said, not really. Not when you look at it from the position of, so I'm standing beside the massage table and I may go into a wide horse stance, for an example, or I might go into a long stance, or I might go into some other stance. And it's what I'm constantly doing, and I'm shifting up my hands all the time in different positions. So it becomes a way of life. And, to be able to instill that into people, that's quite a goal. And you're shaking your head in that's what you want to do, right?
Yeah, and that's the hardest thing with new students is getting them into the mindset that this is meant to be a way of life and not a hobby that we do once or twice a week. And if you
Hmm.
really want to get the benefits of a meditative practice, it needs to be how you live your day, and I always tell new students when they come in, one of the most important things is having a regular daily ritual practice. And it doesn't need to mean that, you have to retire to a cave and meditate for the rest of your life. But if you just did 20 minutes a day and were consistent with that, you could really get a lot of benefits from that. But it takes that consistent effort. And so I break down the practice into ritual practices, active practices, and philosophical practices. And so if you have a 20-minute a day ritual practice, and that could be either a Tai Chi form or some standing meditation or a sitting practice or some breath work or whatever that is for you, and then you integrate some of these active practices that can be done in as little as 60 seconds or 2 minutes. And we do those every 60 or 90 minutes throughout the day to just kind of recheck in. And the great thing about those is you can do them when you're walking down the street or standing in line at the grocery store. And it could be as simple as counting out 10 breaths or doing some spinal rotations or some simple movement exercises. And we integrate these with our ritual practice. Then, lastly, we have the philosophical practices, and those could be both active based or ritual based. And if we use that as kind of our foundation, we start to build this evolving practice that's always growing, always getting deeper. And it's where you really start seeing the value of incorporating the meditative arts into your life.
So the ritual practice is the time that you actually are going to set aside a certain time of each day. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. And one thing I'd like to point out with that, because this is, I've heard over and over so many times people say, I practice this meditation or I listen to this audio or I watch this video. And well, audios and videos are a great source sometimes to learn specific things. When you're doing your ritual practice, we want to shut off the audios, we want to shut off the videos. They're called the internal arts for a reason. It's because that you're meant to turn inward and look inside. You're not meant to be looking at a screen, watching your phone, listening to some music. It's meant to be a time where we can really connect with who we are and have a little bit of that quiet time in our life. And so, for those of you that are on the uh, the audio kick with your meditation or whatever, it's a great source to maybe learn something new. But remember, when you're doing your ritual practice, it's meant to be kind of quiet time.
I love it. I love it. And that's perfect. So there's nothing wrong with like I've got a few videos up myself of some Tai Chi and Qigong movements, and the reason I put them there is to help people with aches and pains in their body, or if they have reoccurring situations, chronic areas, or whatever. Like one that I picked up on one time, and I was practicing, and cloud hands. Now we look at cloud hands, we think about cloud hands, and of course the focus in my brain, if I'm not really looking at it, is well, it deals with the hands. Well, that's very true because you could do knee and shin and stuff like this with your hands. But what I didn't notice until one day is I saw myself in the mirror, and that really activates uh, the full shoulder area, and it's phenomenal. So I tell people, I said, if you have a shoulder issue, start doing cloud hands, and I would demonstrate it to them, and then I said, I've got to put this up on video, and I did. And I tell people, first off, I tell them with a tongue in cheek, I said, this is a martial arts move, and it's a pretty powerful move, but it's also so healing if you look at it that way, and that you can move that whole shoulder girdle, and it's amazing. And then you can elongate it if you want to and stretch right out and really go to town with it. And it's miraculous. And I say, so I'll do some work with them and I'll show them that and stuff. And they say, after I've worked with them a little bit, they say, wow, my shoulder really feels a lot better. I said, you know how much time we've spent on this? He said, no, well, like an hour, 2 hours. No, we've spent 10 minutes on this.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that if you just do that, and then the thing is, I'll say, like, do you have 10 minutes a day? Do you have 15 minutes a day? And like you're saying, do you have 20 minutes a day? And we all say, oh yeah, I got 20 minutes a day. And let's put it into practice though.
Yeah. The Dalai Lama once said that everybody should meditate for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should meditate for an hour. And I love that saying, in that, if you don't have 20 minutes for yourself, you need to evaluate what's going on in your life, because that's it's pretty important.
Yeah. 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 And the things that sometimes we get is people that are so busy during the course of the day, they don't see the opportunities that are there because they're so focused on whatever it is that they do. And if you start talking with them about, well, if you want to employ the 15, 20 minutes, whatever, during the course of the day, think about getting up 15 to 20 minutes earlier. It is a
Yeah.
mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, you know what? One of the things that I've found, I think, that really helps with new people is that, a lot of people see the benefits of meditation, or they understand that there's benefits there. However, if they approach it with the next the mindset that it's just kind of the next good idea, it never sticks. But if you
Mhm.
spend a little bit of time thinking, okay, why do I want to do this? Why is it important to me? Do I want to improve my health? Do I want to get stress and anxiety out of my life? Do I want to live longer into my older years so I can watch my grandkids go up? Or I want to improve my athletic performance? Whatever it is for you, and really think about it and put some time into it. So, tomorrow when that alarm goes off, rather than hitting the snooze button, you're motivated to get up, and there's a reason why you're doing this. And you know I I've mentioned, I've had thousands of students come through the academy, and I would be willing to bet that of the students that listen when they come in here and they do their 20 minutes a day and integrate these active practices, and they do that every day for a year, that I bet 95 to 98% of those students will do this for the rest of their life, because they'll see so much value from the practice that they would be crazy to stop. The ones that don't stick with it are the ones that don't find that discipline in the beginning, which is why I think it's so important to spend some time and really dive into why you want to do the practice.
Let's think about that for a minute. The people that really do want to start this, and we can all talk about it as far as resolutions and stuff like that. And resolutions to me are almost a joke because, you know, why wait until a certain time and just do it? But I remember coming up through the ranks and through the years, I remember different teachers have talked about how we talk about the percentages of the students that really continue on. And it gets to be a rather small number, unfortunately, because some people try it for a while and then they quit. So, what are some things that you can think of because you've had so many of these students come through over the years? What are some of the challenges that people could look forward to, and how to overcome those challenges when they begin a practice like this? So they're brand new, they're coming off the street, they want to get more flexibility, they want to get more power at whatever it may be, but How do you get that person to go to that next level?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues is the way that society has groomed us, and that everybody's in this fast-paced McDonald's type society right now, and they all want it tomorrow,
Yeah.
or they want it now. And this is one of those things that takes time to nurture. And if you really want to see the fruits of your labor, you need to put in the work and the effort. And that's difficult for some people. And so what the only thing that I've really been able to do that really shows any higher percentage of success is to really get people to spend some time and think about their why. Because when they come in, they all have good intentions. They want to do it for a reason, but then they realize, wow, it's been 2 weeks and I'm not a master yet, and they're wondering, is this ever going to happen, and they realize that, hey, this is going to be a little bit of work. And then they start second guessing their decisions. Well, if you have a reason to do it and you find a practice that's fun for you, and that's the other thing too, is, there's so many different meditative practices, even if we're just talking about energetic circulations, breath work, different Tai Chi forms, different Qigong sets, different movement practices that you can do. I recommend to people to try to find something that really is going to resonate with them and that they'll enjoy doing. So it's not so much work. And at least in the beginning, that helps them build some positive momentum. So, because some people, telling them to sit still for 20 minutes and do a sitting meditation is very difficult. They'll
Mm.
sit for 3 minutes and they'll be going crazy. And so for somebody like that, maybe a Qigong set or a Tai Chi form might be a lot better beginning point for them. And I think with the combination of those two things, we can improve the percentages a little bit.
One of the things that I think about when you were talking about that is people that want to keep in mind their motivation and why they want to do this. And I thought, that sounds very similar to how to really expand your meditative practice. And one of the number one things we hear about from people when they start a meditation practice is, I don't know how to quiet down the thought monkeys in my head because I can't make them shut up. And so what we teach and what I've taught, and you can share some stuff there too, is just return to your breath or return to a focus point. And then it really kicked into me in when you are beginning to feel that in meditation, you return to the focus point. You return to whatever it is, whether it's a mantra, whether it's an om, whether it's breath or what have you. But if you do the same mechanical movement in your head when you're feeling like, why am I still doing this same form and I'm really getting tired of it? Maybe that's the time to return to saying, why am I doing this in the first place? You see the focus?
For sure.
And
Yeah, and
it's
it's funny that you say that because that is probably the most common thing I've heard through the years is people will tell me, "Oh, I can't meditate. I can't quiet my mind." And somewhere through time, people got this misconception that in order to meditate, you have to be in this state of nirvana and this blissful state and nothing affects you. And it couldn't be further from the truth.
mm-mm.
I've spent my whole career traveling around the world training with meditation teachers from all over the planet. And I've never once met a teacher who doesn't get distracted. We all do, and that's part of life and that's part of the practice. And the idea with meditation is that if you're sitting for 20 minutes and you get distracted 50 times, that's good. Every time you get distracted, you use your breath, you use your posture, you use the movement to help bring you back to center, and you get a repetition of being distracted and coming back to focus. And if you do that every day for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, you start getting so strong and so focused that doesn't matter what happens to you. If somebody says something to throw you off, if you have a stressful day at work, it doesn't matter what it is. You're so good at coming back to center and finding that balance and that focus that it changes everything you do in any area of your life.
And how to overcome stress, how to overcome
Yes.
tension. It is easy after you've practiced for a while. And you touched on the point too that we hear all the time about we're in such a fast-paced society. Nothing's instantaneous, is it? Is it, Jeff?
No, it takes time, but anything good and that has any kind of value in life takes time and effort.
It does. Yeah. So one of the things that I saw here too, we've got the three types of meditation where you talk about ritual, active, and philosophical. And we've got the ritual down, and I think I know what the active is, and maybe philosophical. Could you break those down for us a little bit and maybe put some practical use into it?
Yeah, so the active practices are great tools. And as you start to build your repertoire of different things to do, different styles of breathing, different movements, you can use these active practices to help control your physical, mental, and emotional state throughout the day. So if you're feeling a sense of imbalance and maybe you're getting excited, you could do some more settling practices to help bring you back down. And you can use this as a strategy. Uh, some examples of some active practices could be just counting out 10 breaths, or maybe doing some spinal rotations, or like you mentioned earlier, playing wave hands. Maybe you do that for 60 seconds, just something to kind of tap back into that awareness state throughout the day. So you're starting to live the practice rather than doing it once in a while or when times are perfect. It's just bringing you back to that connection. On the philosophical side of things, these can be used in active practices or ritual based practices, and they could be things from um, using mantras, using sounds. They could be memorization of different sayings that help train your mindset to be programmed a certain way. One of my meditation teachers had me memorize the Tao Te Ching. If you're familiar with that, there's 81 sayings there, and they're basically these sayings on virtue and how to live in life. And so part of my training for 12 years, every single day I would go through in my head and say those 81 sayings. And that's really valuable. And there's a lot of lessons to be pulled from that. And so there's a lot of ways that we can start to integrate that more of the philosophical side of the training. Maybe it's even like a gratitude practice that you do, maybe 5 minutes every day before you go to bed. You think about all the things you're grateful for. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can integrate those thoughts.
And philosophical kind of lends itself maybe to even some of the old practice of ancestors. And if we look at some, even going into Druidry, for an example, that people would talk about, looking at some of the old Celtic stories from thousands of years ago. And what they would do is they would take one of those stories and they would think about that story while they're in meditation, and not just how the story unfolds or who the good guy is or who the bad guy is or something like that, but go a little deeper and say, well, first off, why did this story come to me? Why am I thinking about this? And then go to the next step and say, how can I pull some practical information from that? So you make that story come alive for you. And to me, that would be like a philosophical approach
For
on
sure.
stuff too. It's not just mantras. It's think about stuff. And it can even now that's going out there a little bit with the mystics and so forth. But even think about this, that, you know, philosophically, and please correct me if I'm not getting this, but say something happened to me during the course of the day. It could have been some kind of connection that I've made with an animal, or made a different connection with something in nature, or it could even be somebody on the street that tweaked me just right, and I got upset maybe, and then so you could use a philosophical approach on that and say, why did I get upset, and what could I have done differently, you
Of
know?
course. Yeah. And that awareness, is through doing a meditative practice. One of the cool things is that not only do you develop that muscle to come back to center that we already talked about, but you also develop the awareness to notice the first sign of imbalance.
Mm,
Because a lot of times people will they'll go off track and they'll think about it for 10, 15, 20 minutes before they finally bring themselves back and realize, hey, I just wasted 20 minutes of my time going down this negative path. Whereas with having that heightened sensitivity and able to recognize that first sign of imbalance, a lot of times it can save you a lot of heartache on the other side.
Yeah. Another one that I'm looking at here is you mentioned something about five regulations that lead to a healthier life. What are those five regulations, if we could talk about
Yeah.
that?
So with any meditation practice, that we break down the kind of fundamental principles that are the foundation of anything, whether it's a sitting practice, a Tai Chi practice, a yoga practice, whatever it is. And those five regulations are regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. And
Okay.
briefly, I will describe these so you have an idea where I'm going
Hmm.
with them.
Yeah.
So, regulating the body, an example of that would be, think about maybe a time when you're sitting down at your computer and you've been there for 3 or 4 hours and your shoulders are rounded forward, your neck's getting stiff, and you're feeling lethargic. And then think about another time when the most important person in your world walks in the room and your body perks up and you're excited and you've got all this energy. This one idea of how we hold our posture in everything we do can hugely change our physical, mental, and emotional state throughout the day. And this is what I mean by regulating the body. And with a little bit of focused effort in a fairly short amount of time, 2 or 3 months, you can really change how you hold your posture in your body and how you move throughout the day. And so this is usually where we begin with any practice, is how do we get that right skeletal alignment?
Mm.
Then the next phase is regulating the breath. And regulating the breath is a very deep practice. You know, Qigong oftentimes is referred to as the science of the breath because there's literally hundreds of different breathing strategies. And we kind of broadly categorize them into yin methods and yang methods. And yin methods are often deeper, more holistic style of meditative practices. An example of a yin breath would be, if you've ever listened to somebody sleep, their natural breathing pattern is a longer inhale and a shorter exhale. And this is the body's natural way of bringing your conscious mind into your subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming.
Hmm.
And so, if we want to emulate that style of breath in our meditations, we can do longer inhales, maybe soft retentions at the end of the inhale, and this is really good for bringing our energy inward, which is great for stress reduction, dealing with anxiety, improving focus. There's lots of reasons why we would do this.
Hmm.
Then we have the yang side of the breath. And the yang side of the breath is more aggressive. It's kind of like if you've ever had to push your car, or you pick up something heavy, your natural instinct is to exhale and put tension in the breath, make it audible. If you ever watch like professional athletes or fighters, a lot of times they'll chant and they'll use that yang side of the breath to help build up their energy. And now, as you start understanding how to use the breath as a strategy, you know, and in Chinese philosophy, they call this balancing the kan and li, or the water and fire. And
Right.
when we start learning how to use this, now we can make adjustments throughout the day and find more balance. You know, everybody goes through the day with emotional ups and downs. Some people are maybe a little more like a roller coaster, others of us maybe a little more balanced. But when you start to see things rise, we can use the breath to bring it back down. And when you start feeling a little depleted, and use the breath to bring it back up, now rather than going through the day like this, we can go through with a little bit more balance and focus. And that helps conserve our energy. It gives us more time to be present in the moment and make better decisions with anything that we do. That would be regulating the breath. Then the next regulation is regulating the mind. And we already kind of briefly touched on this by when we're doing our meditation and you get distracted and you use that focus to come back to center. Well, you know, regulating the mind is a lifelong practice, and it's something that takes a lot of work, but it's so important to recognize these things, because we're all guilty of getting thrown off center by how our mind is racing one way or the other. You know, there's this story that I really like about these two old monks,
Hmm.
and they're walking down this dirt road after a rainstorm, and it's muddy everywhere, and they come up to this big mud puddle, and on the other side of the puddle is this beautiful lady, and she's standing there in a white dress, and she's crying. And the older monk, he yells across the puddle and says, "Ma'am, is everything okay? Can we help you?" And she says, "I need to be somewhere, but if I walk across this puddle, I'm going to get my dress all dirty." So the older monk, he rolls up his pant legs and he walks to the other side of the puddle and picks her up, puts her on his back, takes her to the other side, sets her down, and she's off on her way. Well, him and the younger monk are walking down the road a couple miles, and finally the younger monk is just furious and he says, "You know we're not supposed to touch ladies, but yet you did back there at the puddle." And the older monk looks down at him and says, "You're still thinking about that lady? I left her back there at the puddle." And, you know, it's a simple story, but how many times in our life do we get 2 miles down the road before we figure we got to let something go, you know?
Mm.
And most of the time it doesn't even mean anything other than it just wasted, you know, 20 minutes of our time, or sometimes weeks of our time, because
Yeah.
we're focusing on this thing, you know? And so this idea of regulating the mind is really important. And then the fourth stage, which is regulating the energy, this is a topic where we could literally talk about for weeks, and it's very deep idea. There's a lot of different meditations that we do with circulating the energy in the body to get different outcomes, and different practices that we could do. Um, but this is the idea of regulating the energy. And then lastly is regulating the spirit. And regulating the spirit, again, is a very profound, deep topic. And, you know, like a lot of monks and meditation practitioners who really live the lifestyle, their ultimate goal is to someday work towards that stage of enlightenment, you
Mm.
know, and I don't know if in today's society it's even possible to reach that stage of enlightenment. You know, I've mentioned I've traveled around the world many times training with teachers all over the planet, and I've never personally met anybody I would say was enlightened. But that's kind of the series of the progression of those five regulations.
Okay. Those are phenomenal. Thanks a lot for sharing those. I think we could all take the pieces of those and work them into our day, work them into our life. I love the story, by the way,
Yeah,
the two
nice.
monks and the pond. That says so much that we can see how that we can hold on to something for, like you said, we could hold on to it for 20 minutes. Heck, I know of people that have hung on to stuff for years and they
Yes.
don't understand. Well, I don't, I can't let go of this thing, whatever it might be, or, can't. They just convince themselves that they can't, so they don't. And they don't realize how much it's holding them back from the potential that's out there and
Yeah.
just move forward. Let it go. Yeah, that's some great stuff. So when you're talking about the name of what you do, and the yielding warrior. What is yielding and how can it be useful? I got a pretty good idea from some of the background that I've got, but how can we incorporate that into our lives, Jeff?
Yeah. So my most recent book, The Yielding Warrior, I
Hmm.
break down yielding into three basic categories. We have physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding. Physical yielding is the easiest one to understand. It's the idea that I push you, you push me, whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage eventually is going to push the other person over. But
Hmm.
with yielding, instead of us trying to see who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force. And now I can respond with less effort. So I'm not trying to butt heads with you and see if I'm a bigger, stronger guy. Now, it's obvious how this is beneficial in athletics or the combat sports, because there's often times where you're going to come up against somebody who's bigger and stronger than you, and you need to learn how to deal with that force. And in order to be good at physical yielding, a lot of things have to come into play. You need to be well rooted. The lower part of your body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium without getting tight. The body has to be relaxed. The breath has to be calm, and the mind has to be present. Now, while it may take years of practice to get to a high level of this, from day one, we start to recognize things inside of ourselves and see things in a more clear state that allows us to also see those things more clearly in other people. And this is where it starts to become very interesting. And now we're moving into what I call mental yielding, in that, say, for example, we're having a conversation and I say something that unsettles you, and I pick up on it right from the beginning. It's a lot easier to adjust the conversation and keep us in a happy place than if I'm not paying attention to that. And pretty soon I'm so far off track, you want to slap me upside the head. And so learning how to use yielding in all of your interactions is extremely powerful. One, you're just being more considerate, which is something we could all do more of.
Mm-hmm.
And two, it allows you to be strategic in every interaction, which affects your relationships, your business, if you're in sales, if you're in negotiations, whatever you do. When you can learn how to guide a conversation to a positive outcome with the least amount of resistance, this is extremely powerful. And this is what I call mental yielding.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's also emotional yielding. And emotional yielding is very much like mental yielding, but it's with your own interpersonal conflicts. So you think about, oftentimes something will happen to us and we'll respond and we'll go down this path. And we might get an hour, a day, a week down that road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice. But with yielding and our heightened awareness and our ability to be more present and in the moment, it allows us to step back and take a little bit better perspective of what's going on and make a more educated decision on the other side and how to respond to things. And I've been explaining this idea of yielding for years here running the academy. And one of the most common things I'll hear people say is that, that yielding makes a lot of sense, and in fact, I use that all the time. And while I would agree, I think everybody does some degree of yielding in their life all the time, whether they recognize it or not. It's kind of like if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, I guarantee you he would see things about the timeline and the series of events that happened that I know at least I would have no clue of. The meditative arts helps us see things inside of ourselves and inside of other people that most people will go through their life and never have any clue of without adopting some kind of a meditation practice.
So optimizing some of these practices are going to yield some incredible results in people's lives. And that can almost be the mantra that people could go back to. And when they're beginning their practice, they come into a school like this and they just start to go. And I remember in karate class, for example, I can remember when people would come in, it seems around the turnover would happen right around, there were different points, but one of them was really interesting around the white belt to yellow belt phase. And they would start to question, why am I even doing this? And you can realize that when you start to look at yielding and you start to look at, how to improve my life, I mean, that learning these things, it doesn't just teach us how to fight. It doesn't just teach us how to yield to the opponent. It teaches us how to go through life itself. That when something is in our way, when something is blocking our movement, we don't necessarily bull our way through it, but we look at the situation and move accordingly. And that's exactly what you've been talking about. That's what we've been talking about, isn't it?
Yes. It's having a strategy behind what you do and being able to recognize things before they gain too much momentum. So it's easier to make the decision. I always tell people to think about, say you're standing on the side of a mountain and you drop a pebble. It's easy to bend over and pick up the pebble. But if it starts rolling down the hill and creates an avalanche, good luck trying to stop that. It's the same thing with our thoughts. If we let one negative thought lead to another, to another, to another, it starts gaining that momentum, and it's a lot more difficult to make those changes than if we were to just be able to recognize it from the beginning and make those little shifts. It goes a long way.
It does. And you and I can see the practicality of it because one of my favorites, if I get into a school someplace, is I like to find somebody and I would say, I like to play with Tai Chi and play with Qigong. And they say, how can you play with that? And how can you have a smile? I said, it beats the alternative. And then I ask him, do you want to do some push hands? And just wait for it. I remember taking a Qigong leadership training course with this lady, and she was, I'm short, but she was probably 5'3", maybe. And we were talking about push hands. The only thing is my vernacular that I was using to help her understand it was sticky hands. And she says, "Oh, push hand." I said, "Yeah, a little bit." And she goes, "You want to push hand?" I said, "Sure." And we're just kind of flowing back and forth, little tiny thing. And like I said, I'm small, but I've got a solid 30 to 40 pounds on her. The next thing I know, I'm 7 feet across the room, and I don't even know how I got there. But it's using what you have to accomplish what you need at a given time and a given place with the implementation of the physical, the mental, and the emotional, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful practice. Um, gosh. So let's rehearse what we talked about all the way back in the beginning. You do have an online program for people. You have a school there in Oregon, right?
Yes.
Okay. And if people wanted to reach out to you to learn more about this that we've been talking about for a while today, Jeff, how would they do that? What's the best thing to do?
So you could go to theyieldingwarrior.com. That's my online membership site, as well as talks about um, our online training program. It has our teacher training program up there. And if you go to theyieldingwarrior.com/book, you could get a free copy of my recent book. Just pay for shipping and handling, The Yielding Warrior. It's also up on Kindle and Amazon if you want to look for it there as well. But that's a great way to get in touch with me.
So tell us one thing, Jeff. What does Jeff Patterson do in his own life to create a better life for himself?
Right now, one of my main drivers is my kids. I've got two kids, one who just turned 16 and another one who's 14. And, I try to spend every moment that I possibly can with them. And while they'll still want to hang out with dad, they're getting kind of cool now that they're teenagers. So dad's not that cool anymore. Um, but uh, but yeah, we still have a lot of fun together, and I love hanging out with my kids. That's kind of a close to my heart there, and then the living the meditative lifestyle. I've been in the martial arts for well over 36 years. It's been my profession for 30. Um, I've always loved the fast-paced martial arts, the Brazilian jiu-jitsu, the boxing. It's always challenging and fun. There's something about the meditative arts that really adds enrichment to your life, and it's one of those things that is just part of who I am at this point. People ask me, well, when was the last time you missed a day? And I haven't missed a day doing my practice since I had hip surgery 4 or 5 years ago, and so I just don't miss. It's not who I am. I get up if I've got to travel to the other side of the country or whatever, and I've got to get up at 3 a.m. I get up at least 3:30 or 2:30 so I can get a little bit of training in before I hop on the plane, and it's just become part of who I am.
Yeah. You could spin us off into another quick thing here. So you've had hip surgery and you're still doing this work. How do you do that?
Did a lot of rehab and just never give up, you know.
hmm That's that's it. Never give up.
Yeah.
Keep going. Any other thoughts you'd like to share with our folks for today, Jeff? We really appreciate the opportunity that you've given us to talk and so forth and share your insights and so forth.
What one little quick thing is if you're really thinking about taking on a meditation practice, it's so worth your time and your value to find yourself a guide. I've literally seen students come into the academy that have been practicing following this audio program or this video series for, 10, 15 years sometimes. And they're, barely out of the wading pool. They
Mm.
don't really see anything. And, life is short. We're not here that long, and your time is valuable. And having somebody to help guide you on the path, you can really get so much more for your time. And, if you could accomplish in 1 year what somebody else could do in 10 or 15 years, it's probably worth your time and effort to find somebody help point you in the right direction. I always tell people to think about, imagine if you have never in your life witnessed or know anything, not even one rule about basketball. And I take you to a basketball court and I give you a ball and I say, go play basketball. Think about how good you're going to be. Whereas if you have a coach and he's teaching you how to dribble and he's teaching you how to shoot and he's teaching you how to run plays and work off your teammates, think about what you can accomplish in 6 months in that environment versus trying to do it on your own. Meditation's complex. There's a lot of different angles and ways that you can do the practice. And as I mentioned, I've been studying for 36 years and it's my profession. I do it every day. I'm still just the student. If somebody like me who's invested that many hours and that much time and study and travel is still a student, figuring out how to do it on your own is kind of difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you do that for people? Can you guide, have you guided people along those lines? I'm guessing you probably have.
Oh yeah, and that's my career, is
Yeah.
teaching people how to integrate and build a life practice around the meditative arts.
And I'm glad you mentioned that as well, because the book that you've got is phenomenal. The mere fact that you've got a business that has gone as long as it has like this, but at the same token, the simplicity of it all, that you make yourself available as one of those guides that for somebody, and you could start off with the idea of meditation. That would be your goal, but then you can intermingle it with some physical activity that shows you how you can do the other forms of regulating and so forth to work through and make that meditation part of your life in a very tangible way. So,
Yes.
great. Jeff Patterson, this has been great. I really appreciate it once again. And go enjoy your day if you would.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor to be here.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Jeff Patterson. We're going to talk a little bit more about getting in touch with him and so forth right after this. And this is going to be an opportunity to do some meditative work. And if you're going to join in with this, I encourage you to not be driving a car, doing anything that involves your total attention, because I want you to devote all of your attention to just this time of relaxation and this time of meditation. We're going to begin with this practice as a little practice with breath work. And as we go along through further podcasts down the road, we'll take it a little bit deeper each time. But today, all I want to do is I just want us to learn to breathe like maybe we've not breathed before. And you say, well, that's silly. I breathe every day. And you may have heard me say this before. If you really want to get an idea about how to breathe properly, go watch an infant breathe, because they engage their entire being with their breath. They're not just breathing a shallow breath, they're breathing a full breath. And you can see their diaphragm move. It almost looks like they're breathing into their stomach, because their stomach is actually the lower diaphragm, and that's just the lower part of the ribs pushing the lower diaphragm out. And that just involves the whole process of breathing, because that's really how far down your lungs actually go. Okay, so enough of that. Let's go into some breathing, shall we? And the way we're going to do this is we're going to do it through some counting. and I'll be doing the counting for you. We're going to probably change this up a little bit down the road, but for today, this is going to be something very, very simple, and it's going to be a 4 count. Each time I do a 4 count, you're going to be breathing in for a 4 count and exhaling out for a 4 count. And we're going to do this 4 times. And then after we do that, we'll do some more guided work. So if you're all set to begin and get yourself nice and comfortable, I would suggest maybe lying down. Recliner works really well, or you can even just sit in a good supported chair with your feet flat on the floor and your hands on your upper legs. So let's close our eyes and begin by taking a nice, deep, cleansing breath in through your nose for 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, and then inhale 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. And now inhale again in through the nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale through the nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, last time. Inhale through the nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now just kind of breathe normally without the counts as I talk with you. And I just want you to find a space. Now, this space can be maybe a place that you can do some visualization with, where you're going to create a space. And this space can be a forest, it can be beside a seashore, it could be walking along a dune someplace, it can be just about anywhere. It could even be in your garden and you're surrounded by butterflies. Or you could be in a sacred grove, like Druid practice, where you're surrounded by beautiful oaks and you create this space as you're breathing and as you're here. So let's create that space and begin to feel everything around you. Smell everything around you. Sense everything around you. Feel the breeze against your face and against your body. Look up at the sky in your mind's eye. It could be nighttime, could be daytime. You may see all the stars. You may see the surroundings of a beautiful group of oak trees above you, and feel the earth beneath your feet. And now, as you're doing your breath work, I want you to visualize and feel your feet against the earth. And as you breathe, feel the energy from the earth come up through your feet. Feel it begin to flow in and around your feet. And let it travel up through your shins. All that relaxation, all that beauty, all that energy of the earth coming up through you. And let it go on up through your knees, up through your thighs, up through the groin, in and through all the digestive areas, everything. And you're feeling all of this beautiful energy from the earth coming up through you. You're becoming more and more a part of the earth. As you're seated, as you're lying down, just feel everything around you. And you're not apart from everything. You're a part of everything. And as you're continuing to breathe, you feel the energy flow now up through the diaphragm and up through the chest. Flowing even further, allowing it to go into your shoulders, flowing over your shoulders, down towards your fingertips, on up through the neck, Just feel it continue to flow gently, lovingly, in a caring form, almost like it was also shared with light as it grows up and goes up from the earth into your whole being. Now it's up into your head, and you feel it surrounding your head. Feel it in your face, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your ears, right on up to the top of your head. And feeling that energy now flowing from the earth through your feet and everywhere we've talked about. And now it's up to the top of your head. And just sit there and just be with that space. And just see with your mind's eye everything around you. And look at all the beauty around you. And feel all the beauty around you. Nothing else matters right now. It's just you and your world and your space, your sacred space, your healing space, where you are totally, completely in control of everything around you. And you may be able to connect with another being, a spirit guide, an animal, whatever. I'm going to let you be for just a couple of seconds. And just be. And now take another nice deep cleansing breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. If you've had some guides or helpers, animals, people, lost loved ones, anything, anyone like that, be sure to thank them for the time that you've shared with them and that they have shared with you. Next time we'll look into waiting for some teachings. But this is just kind of the beginning of the journey, the beginning of some guided meditation. Hope you enjoyed it. And I will be doing this again with you very, very soon. Now just open your eyes and look at the day before you and consider how you can be a living part toward your own better life. Well, everyone, we've come to the end of another episode. I do hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank Jeff Patterson again for joining me on this episode. And as Jeff mentioned, you can contact him through his website, theyieldingwarrior.com. That's theyieldingwarrior.com. There you're going to find all sorts of information about Jeff and his classes, both online and in person, along with details to order your own copy of The Yielding Warrior. If you're seeking more insights and advice on how to create a better life for yourself, well, be sure to visit my website, towardabetterlife.com, where you'll find my blog, information about classes, some products, and how to get in touch with me for Toward a Better Life mentoring sessions. Send your request to me, Kevin, at towardabetterlife.com for all the details. Join me next time on Toward a Better Life as I welcome best-selling author Scott Allen. Scott has written several books, including the best-selling Do the Hard Things First, and it is really a cool interview. That was translated, by the way, his book into 16 different languages and over 500,000 copies have sold. Scott's dedication to teaching, skill building, and inspiring action offers podcast listeners not just stories, but transformative insights and practical strategies for embracing challenges, fostering personal growth, and pursuing relentless self-improvement. So join us next time as I welcome Scott Allen. As I mentioned earlier, thanks ever so much for your support of this podcast, and we're going to go into our 4th year pretty soon. Remember, I am looking for your talent, everybody. If you have a story, you're a storyteller, a poet, a musician, you'd like to share with me and our audience, send it to me through Kevin at towardabetterlife.com. This show is not just about me, everybody, and my guests. It's about all of you, and all of you like-minded people with their stories, ideas, and activities on what we can do to generate a better life individually and collectively. We'd love to hear stories from the bardic ways, pagan, folk stories, folk medicine, stuff you like to do to create a better life for yourself, old folk remedies. Well, you know, about anything covers it. Don't forget, if you enjoyed the episode or you learned something really good today, please consider following and subscribing to Toward a Better Life. That's through your favorite podcast platform like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, or whichever you choose, and be sure to leave me a review. This helps the podcast more than I can say, and it allows us to reach out to more and more people, which would mean the world to me. If you've got questions or if you'd like to be my guest or you got something to share, please write to me, Kevin at towardabetterlife.com for the details. That's Kevin at towardabetterlife.com. Until next time, enjoy your journey toward a better life.